Welcome to the podcast that fuels the minds of ambitious business owners. Fuel provides business owners like you with easy to digest, bite-sized learnings to help grow your capability and keep you on track to achieving your version of success. Our expert speakers will draw on their own experiences and share valuable insights into areas that matter most in business.
Hi, thanks for stopping by. I'm your host, Paul Hobbs, and on today's podcast, I've got Dan Henderson, the Managing Director of the Plus More Group. So what better thing to talk about than leadership style and leadership culture and team culture? So Dan, what are the key competencies and qualities you see in business leaders you're working with?
Yeah, so there's a few things, Paul. I think first and foremost, team members are looking for integrity as part of their leadership. And you know, for me, integrity means doing what you say. And that's really critical, you know, particularly within the context of what we've had over the last couple of years. You know, employees want certainty, they want reliability, and they want to know that their leadership group are going to do what they say they were going to do. I think the other thing is that, you know, team members are really looking for the courage and tenacity, and I think great leaders that I've worked with over the years have a true sense of that courage to do something different. They're visionary, they're big picture thinkers, and they're really able to bring their team along for the journey in terms of where they're going. They have the capacity to get to know the team, and I think, you know, more and more what we're seeing from these younger generations that are coming through our business is that relationships are really important. Whether you're a small firm or a big firm, everyone wants to know and feel like there's a relationship with their leadership group, and they have a clear understanding of who they are and what they're wanting out of their employment and tenure within the business. I think, you know, having a great judge of character, but also I guess an ability to judge the environment and the operating environment that we're working in, and being able to use that judgment for the benefit of the whole organisation is incredibly important. And I think probably one of the last things, and I'm sure, like, you know, this isn't a limited list, but, you know, one of the last things that I know that our team members are really looking for and really give us a lot of feedback around is our leadership group's ability to connect and understand and have, I guess, an emotional intelligence. You know, emotional intelligence it's not a new thing. It's been around for forever, but it's something as a leadership group we've only really started talking about over the last 5 years. And you know, having a sense of what actually emotional intelligence means as a leader in the business allows us to really get in and understand our personal impacts and positions and how that might affect others within the organisation.
Because I guess the word that often springs to mind is empathy, isn't it, in that setting? Can I just ask a question? One of the things, you touched on courage before. One thing that sort of struck me is that to have the courage to make tough decisions. What's the difference between having courage and taking risks? Because risky behaviour, courage can often be one and the same thing, or it could be seen in the same thing. So can they go hand in hand, or is courage sit outside risk?
Well, that's a really good question, Paul. I think, to me, courage and risk do go hand in hand to a certain extent. But when we talk about risk, I think, you know, risk taking is you're either taking flippant risks or you're taking calculated risks. And I think someone that's courageous is probably courageous, they're visionary, they're big picture thinkers. And then alongside that, you may have an appetite for risk that is different to other people. And being able to harness that risk appetite for the positive. So, you know, being prepared to take calculated risks, that you understand what the flow-on effects and the impacts are for both the business and for your employees and perhaps for the clients or whoever else it might be that you're working with, stakeholders. It's about bringing those couple of things together.
And I guess it relates back to that good judgment, doesn't it? Which sort of is that thing that works it. So, can you have different leadership styles, and can they be equally successful?
Yeah, so I think the reality is, you know, when we talk about the quadrant of leadership capabilities, everyone will have a natural disposition, and whether you're naturally directive or you're naturally empowering or coaching, they all have their benefits and positive attributes. really great leaders, in my experience, are able to flex and work across probably one or two of those quadrants. It's unusual in my experience to have someone that can work across all the quadrants effectively, because overarching, you'll have a natural disposition to be one more than the other. Great leaders are aware of that, and they're aware of their impact. So if you're a directive leader, being able to swing into being a coach or swing into being empowering, you'll have a really strong team, a team that will follow and want to be part of your journey. But if you can't flex out of being directive, it's going to be a difficult environment to work in, I would expect. One of the other things that we use, and I mean, when we talk about these leadership quadrants, we're picking up on, I guess, personality nuances. One of the matrices that we use within the organisation is it's a colour matrix, and it's quite simply, red, green, blue, yellow. And each quadrant will have different personality traits that will have some relationship with your leadership styles. So if you're red, your natural disposition will be directive. If you're yellow, you're likely to be really outgoing, very people orientated. You'll be likely empowering in your style. And so within the organisation, we talk about those colours as part of our language. So red, green, blue, yellow. And if someone catches someone, I guess, in a position where they are being a bit directive, and maybe it's come off as being a bit stern, we'll use the language quite colloquially, like, geez, mate, that's a bit red,
Love it.
Settle down a bit, and I think that's really good to have that as part of your organisation's culture, where team members can feel that they can challenge those leadership styles that are coming through in particular situations. The key to all of it, Paul, is that you can flex. So if you are naturally yellow or you're naturally green, being able to flex into the other quadrants becomes incredibly important, depending on what sort of business and what your role is within the business, because that allows you to be the most effective, and from a I guess an employment experience, or give you the full experience in terms of what you're trying to achieve.
I guess in some businesses you might have quite a flat structure, so you're not, but with ones that have a sort of a deeper structure, would you use those 4 quadrants in different layers and levels? Like if you're working with your immediate management, you might use a different style, and if you're working with people, say, further down the structure, you might have a different style, or would you use those across all layers within an organisation?
Within our roles as business owners and team leaders, in the same way for our clients as business owners, there's an understanding of flexing to the situation. So, if you're in the boardroom with 2 clients or whatever the case might be, or with a banker or some stakeholder, you're more likely to be in that directive mode of communication, because there's a baseline understanding of what they understand and what you understand, and it's about outcomes. Whereas if you're working with a junior accountant and talking to them about how to prepare a forecast or a piece of information for a client, then absolutely you're going to be in that supportive, collaborative coaching mode, where they're learning, it's a safe environment, they can ask questions, and through that we're building trust in the relationship to allow them to grow to the next level.
So I guess you've got good leadership, hopefully, but then you've got teams below that. So what are the characteristics of a high-performing team as such? Dan, what do you think? You've got some things to add to that? Like communication, I would have thought would be quite a key part in that. Open comms, sort of getting people talking about ideas and feeling comfortable talking about ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So, building psychological safety within your team becomes really important. And that's a key element in my mind of a high-performing team is having a psychological safe environment where people can ask questions. There's no silly questions. They're going to be treated with respect. And they have a clear understanding of what their role is within the organisation and how that impacts on the broader business. I think, one of the really important things around building a high-performing team environment is, as leaders or business owners, imparting the knowledge and sharing, I guess, what the journey is of the business. So that's having real clarity around what the vision and what the business purpose is, and ensuring that the team understand and acknowledge how their role feeds into that. And so to feed that along a little bit, it's having clarity around what their individual objectives are and how they they impact and support the business objectives and what the key outcomes are for that particular role. And particularly with our junior team members, it's about your role's X, and inherently they'll want to progress to something different. So how do you get from here to here, and for them to understand what those key outcomes are and how they can impact and take control of their own careers through that journey. And as I say, it all links back to the business objectives and having clarity in terms of the individual and the business so that they're working together to achieve that.
We can expand on this in a moment, but I guess there are some things that we've talked about, the positive things that build trust, but then you've got the breakers, the things that can absolutely obliterate those things at a moment. Can you just sort of expand on a couple of those things, because obviously they're the things you've really got to watch out for that can undo all the good work you've done.
Yeah, so Paul, a couple of things that'll break that environment of trust and really good, positive, strong leadership will be inconsistency in leadership approaches, and it may be within your leadership team. So you've got 4 people within your leadership group, 2 people are off doing one thing, the other 2 are doing something completely different. And from a team member's point of view, there's a complete lack of alignment in terms of the leadership delivery and approach, and that's enough to break trust within the organisation. It may be a lack of clarity around organisational purpose or the business objectives and outcomes. And so, you may have team members that are actually, call it languishing for what do they do next, or how does their role impact what the outcomes of the business, is ultimately. So, there's a number of things that as leaders we can do, which we may not be aware of, that actually impact what that overall sort of outcome is. It can be simply, things like how you present when you come into the office. There's been a lot of chat over the last few years about bringing your whole self, and I like the notion of it, and I agree with it in terms of what that means. But if you're having a bad day and you come in and as a leader you present that you're having a bad day, I come from the place where that's not going to go well for you as a leader, because it's going to transcend right through the organisation.
Dan, I guess there's got to be a bit of give and take too, because you have to be able to think. It's all very well asking your workers to be open with you, but then you want the boss to be able to, or the leaders to be equally open about where they sit. I mean, it's obviously a fine line being able to get this right in the sweet spot.
Yeah, there is a fine line. You're right, and that's where I think great cultures led by transparency and clear understanding of what the business is trying to achieve, and if you can tee up the objectives of the individual and the objectives of the business, then that's going to be a great start for you in terms of building a really effective, high-performing culture, because relatively what we're trying to create there is alignment between the team member and the business. So
if business owners are listening now, what are some of the sort of the key takeaways that they can either implement or do right now to improve their culture?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. First thing would be have a clear understanding of what your leadership style is and how that influences and impacts on the team, and get in touch with the idea of what flexing means, so that if you are one particular style and you know that you don't move from it, that you have the ability to be agile across the different styles. I think the other thing would be is get a clear sense of what your culture temperature is, whether you're using a platform to do that through a survey, you're reflecting on exit interviews, whatever the case is. Get a clear sense of where you are and line that up with what your business purpose is and where you want to be in the future, so that you can start taking your team on the journey of what a great, effective culture is going forward.
The power of engagement. Dan, thanks very much indeed. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to Fuel. Make sure to follow Fuel wherever you get your podcasts.